it's not, to emphasize this point, it's not only the developing dream and the developing world that died. It's not only that the developing world didn't achieve those objectives, social stability, full employment, all of those things that were associated with developed country status. The developed country's dreams also died. Because you have to remember, when I was a student in the 1960s in Toronto, I studied industrial relations, among other things. And in 1964, the rubber workers of Akron, Ohio, which is now a ghost town, by the way, negotiated the first four-day work week. And there were wall-to-wall seminars discussing this development. And I can absolutely assure you that almost every expert you would have asked, and everyone at those seminars, and I attended many of them, would have said, oh, by the year 2013, and boy, did that seem a long time away at that time. Well, of course, everybody will have that, and people will have long holidays, and they will retire very early. And this was a no-brainer. This, honestly, people believed this. They knew this because it was such a simple argument. Here was the market economy. The market economy was powerful. The market economy kept producing productivity gains, and working people, as they became more materially affluent, would choose, on balance, to take more of their share of the gains in terms of leisure. And so we had seminars. There were seminars about how universities would have to be restructured so that they would become less task and job focused, and they would be more institutions that would prepare people for this life of leisure that lay ahead of them. I'm glad you're laughing, because it's so, these things, they almost sound outlandish now. I have used for years documents from our own government which say that, well, of course we'd like to have jobs with social benefits and with some job security, but unfortunately we can't, because competitive pressures are such that we have to support the casualization of labor, contract labor, etc., etc. This is a nightmare. And it's a nightmare that makes no sense if you're standing right side up. There is no, in an affluent society, of course it should be the case that the objective of efficiency should gradually become less important relative to other objectives. The objective of efficiency is to be able to produce the chairs and the beds and the clothes and the houses that we need to live. But once we get really, really good at that, and everybody has a lot of clothes and a lot of TVs, that should become less important. And society should have the right and should allow, and natural forces would lead, in my view, if people were really left to choose, to exactly this outcome. But the reason why this outcome isn't possible is because leisure, idle workers don't produce, Marx would have called it surplus value, economists would call it profit. We are locked into a machine that has those overriding objectives. And instead of producing the outcomes that everybody expected, everybody wanted, everybody desired, we have produced an outcome where you and my students confront a world where even the idea of a regular career-based job with benefits and career prospects and stability, a job that would give you a basis for raising a family, for being a productive member of a community, even that idea is treated increasingly as some kind of idealistic fantasy. This is absurd. And the reason why that dream wasn't realized is exactly the same reason why the development dream wasn't realized. And by the way, don't ever let anybody tell you, because this is the last argument of the status quo people. They say, well, if we tried to protect those conditions of workers in the developed countries, it would have been at the expense of the workers in the developing countries. And if that were true, it would be a very powerful argument, and it would confront us with a truly enormous ethical dilemma, in which I probably in the end would come down on those who would say we need to make space for the workers from the developing countries. But that was never the choice, and that is not the choice. And undermining the conditions of workers in our societies was not the means of empowering workers in the other societies. It was the means of leaving them to work in those factories that just burned down in Bangladesh. In Mexico today, real wages today are lower than they were in the 1970s. And most developing country societies have now become literally disintegrated in a very, very deep way, some more than others, but many to quite extraordinary degrees, because as many of you will know, remittances are now among the highest, and in many cases the highest sources of foreign exchange. But that statistic tells you something about the societies we're talking about. I once gave a lecture in a border town in Mexico. It was a shocking moment. I arrived, I walked out of the airport, and directly across the airport is a fence, a high electrified fence. Behind that is a no man's land, and another fence, no man's land, and another fence. And as right in front of the airport, there's a placard that says, there's a cross. And the people who met me said, that's a signal that somebody died trying to cross the fence at this point. And as we drove into town, there were more crosses. And as we got to the point where we turned into the city, there was a placard that said, along this stretch of fence, 3,627 people have died since some year, I forgot exactly. Shocking. And yet when I came to give my talk, and I did this with some trepidation, I said to people that I was shocked, I was truly shocked by this sight, by this experience. And I had to say that the notion of separate societies is one that we abandon at our peril. There are some people who think, and I can understand how you get there, and when you look at things on an individual level, you can easily get there. You say, well, why the hell have these borders? Why can't people just go across? I mean, come on. We already have free movement of capital. We have virtually free movement of goods. All I can say to you is if we had free movement of labor tomorrow, you could kiss goodbye the idea of collective social policy. And that's the key to this whole story. All those conditions that I talked about, those conditions associated with development, they were all conditions that could only exist, and that existed because societies had made choices. That's what democratic political processes are supposed to be about. But in order for society to make choices through those political processes, they have to exist as entities. The members of those societies have to have a sense of themselves as members of those societies. They have to share, at some level, at some fundamental level, a commonality of interest around which they can negotiate their differences. In the absence of such social entities, there can be no social policy. Then you would live in a world where if you got sick, well, it's your problem. You have money, get treatment. If you don't, well, hopefully you have a relative or someone who can help. What the task was, and this is what the task of development set out to do, the task